Hey there. A short time after I started this video series, one viewer described these videos as deep cuts, or my look at deep cuts. Now, I wasn't really familiar with that term. And so my understanding is a deep cut is basically it's an obscure song, for example. So if you have like a musical artist, you have your singles, you have the songs that get radio play and everybody kind of knows them. But then of course the fans, they're going to get the albums and they're going to get a lot more content. And some of those the average person will not have heard of, but maybe the fans really like them. I can definitely think of some musical artists that I've been a fan of in the past that my favorite songs of theirs have been deep cuts or B-sides. So that kind of fits in with what I'm doing here. I mean, I'm highlighting all sorts of older games. Not all of them are obscure, but they're all relatively old. At least when you consider the cult of the new that has its grasp on the board game hobby right now. So I thought, okay, that's cool. What are some deep cuts that I can do for this video series? Now, there are some obscure games that I can do, and I will do. And those will really be some deep cuts. This week, I thought I'd focus on a very famous pair of designer and publisher, and that's Uwe Rosenberg and Lookout Games. Now, they have published a number of really well-respected games in the hobby, and games that are still popular today. Games like Agricola, Ora et Labora, Caverna, Le Havre, Newfoundland, right? And these are really highly rated on Board Game Geek. And they're even the older games of those are still enjoyed today. They get new editions or whatever. So I thought I'd cover a game that those two did that you can't really buy in stores anymore. It's not that famous. And that's Merkator, this one here. Now, it is for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, and the box says 45 to 90 minutes. The thing is, in the game, there's a short game and a long game, and the 4-player game will basically be about twice as long as a 2-player game, maybe a bit less, but it's possible. So the time range can vary widely. Like a 2-player short game, definitely you can play within 45 minutes. And a 4-player long game might go over 90. So the range is big. I'm actually going to teach the short game because if you play it once, it'll probably be the short game. But I happen to be a big fan of the long game. If you have the time, I suggest it. But anyway, I'll show you how the short game plays, and then we'll talk about why it's a board gem. All right, I've set up this game for 3-player short game. And I've kind of already set it up just to save time. I know there's a lot to take in here, but bear with me, I'll walk you through all the components. We have the time board here, and on the time board you're going to fill up these rows with time counters based on the number of players. So we've set it up for a short game, 3 players, so we're filling it up to this number here, this 3. This is the main board, and as you can see, there's 8 large squares, which represent the 8 major locations of the game. These are the locations that actually produce goods, and each location produces 1 different colored cube. And the game is going to start, each major location is going to start with 1 cube of its color. So Spain is red, it's going to start with 1 red cube. Each player gets an office board, that's what this is here, which shows their warehouses, and a table which shows their contracts. And in the short game, you start with 4 contracts valued 2 through 5. And the rest of them are going to be put just somewhere nearby that everybody can see. You won't need the rest of the 2s. You'll see why in a second. Each player also gets this little supply board and fill it up with 1 cube of each type, just a kind of a way to jumpstart the game a little bit. And there's money here. Players don't start with any money. And these are building cards. They're end game scoring cards. So you're gonna bring up 4, which are available for players to purchase. And then these are the bonus cards. And I didn't bother setting it up, but each player starts with 2 random ones. And then you're gonna set up 4 face up the players can purchase later. The general kind of concept of the game is that you are trying to deliver contracts and make money, sort of. But money is not the goal. The goal is victory points. Each contract is worth a number of victory points at the end of the game based on its value. So this is worth 2 points and this is worth 5 points. But you can only score the full value for 5 of your contracts. In fact, for most of the game, you can't have more than 5 contracts. So those are worth points at the end of the game, but at any point you can sell contracts for money. And again, you'll get that much money. So if you sell your 3 contract, you'll get 3 coins. Coins are only used to buy these cards. Building cards for in-game bonuses, and bonus cards, which are for getting more cubes during the game. They're investments. The general flow is that a player will possibly do some investments, maybe sell some contracts, maybe buy some stuff, and then travel to one of the locations on the board. They'll get any cubes that happen to be at that location, and they may also fulfill contracts. And one of the interesting things in this game is that, like, normally I would think like, oh, you fulfill a contract, so the contract goes away. Well, in this game, it doesn't. You still keep that contract. Your reward is not money. Your reward is another contract of the next higher value. So in general, you're trying to get better and better contracts. The contracts become harder and harder to get. They require more goods that need to be delivered. But in the end, the game end will trigger either when we run out of time, which is represented by these time counters, or somebody fulfills a 10 contract. When they do, they get this card, which counts as a contract and is just worth 14 points at the end of the game. And then everybody has one more round, one final round, and then you total up your points. So what a player does on their turn to start is they can do investments. The first thing is, if they want to, they can sell any of their contracts. Any of their contracts that they don't think they'll fulfill again, or maybe they're a low-valued contract. You sell the contract, you get the card, and you just discard it, and you get as many coins as is shown on the card. So this one is a 2, you would get 2 coins. Normally, over the course of the game, you can't have more than 5. So at this point, the start of your turn, if you have more than 5 contracts, you have to sell at least some contracts in order to get down so that you have at least 5. Otherwise, it's optional, right? You can choose to sell or not, but you have to be under 5. So then you have some money, and then you can optionally buy these cards. If you have more than 15 coins, you have to buy cards. 15 is your maximum. If you have more than 15 coins, you must buy something here until you're below 15 or lower than or equal to 15. But otherwise, it's optional. You can buy it or not. These cards are bonuses that give you cubes if you visit a particular location. And like I said, these are in-game scoring cards. So for example, this one says 1 point per type of good you have. Now, what does that mean, type of good? Well, if you look at your office board here, you look at your warehouses, there's 2 locations for each colored cube. If you look and see the red cubes, there's citrus fruit and there's spice. And if you look at Spain, there you go, citrus fruit and spice. Those are the 2 goods that Spain produces. And whenever you get cubes, you have choice with a little bit of restriction as to what they are. And what they are depends on where you put them on your board. So if you get a red cube, it can be a citrus fruit or it can be a spice. It's up to you. So after you potentially sell contracts and potentially buy investments, then is your main turn. And your main turn is, the main part of your turn is traveling. This is the marker. This is the destination marker. This shows where you're going to go. All the trips start from Hamburg. Hamburg is your home. That's home base, all right? And then from there, you can choose where to go. You can even choose to go to Hamburg. You can go to the same location the last player went to. There's no restriction on that. Each location has a number of time counters that you need to spend to go there, or you get if you get there. Because Hamburg is home, you actually will gain time counters if you were to go there. Whereas if you were to go far away to, say, Spain, you would actually have to spend a time counter. And if you don't have a time counter, if you don't have enough, you can't go there, period. You have to get time counters and then spend them to go to the faraway locations. So in some cases, you'll go close to home, which will gain you time counters, and then later on you may go far away, in which you can spend time counters. So you choose a location. Let's say, okay, I want to fulfill this one. I'm going to need grain. I'm going to go to Danzig. So the first thing that happens is I get all the cubes that are in that color. Okay, so I'll get this yellow, and I could choose whether it's grain or saltpeter. And I'm going to choose grain because I want to go to England and fulfill this later, right? Now, like I said, each location has a cost, or it can be a positive thing. It can be things you gain in terms of time counters. So in this case, going to Danzig would gain you 1 time counter, and you'll take a time counter from this board. When you gain time counters, you take them from this board. You just take them from the top row and then go down. And so you just keep that in front of you. And then every location that's adjacent to it, you look at these ropes, these lines, gains a new cube. So in this case, Russia, Hamburg, and Sweden will both gain a cube. Now, when you gain just 1 cube, like I said, you can choose whether it's grain or saltpeter in this case. Now, the only restriction is that if you gain 2 or more cubes, you must get at least 1 of each. But otherwise, it's up to you. If you're getting 6 cubes, you can get 1 of one and 5 of the other, or 3 of each, as long as there's at least 1 of each type. You can also go to these minor locations instead of the major locations. There's never any goods to pick up there. And also, the way the cubes come on the board works a little differently. In the case of Denmark, for example, you see 2+. What that means is every location that has 2 or more cubes already on it gets an extra 1. So if you look at Newfoundland here, which is 0+, that means if a player chooses to go to Newfoundland, every major location is going to get a cube. Now this player can fulfill any contracts they have. If they have a contract that shows Danzig and they have the goods for that, then they can deliver that contract. If you don't have enough, there's a few options. One is that in the short game, each player has this little supply board. And at any point during the game, even at the end of the game, just to kind of help you get points with these building tiles, building cards, at any point you can take any one of these cubes and immediately put it on your board as whatever you want. That means that on your first turn, you could actually deliver. I didn't have to go to Danzig to get grain. I could have instead gone directly to England and simply pick up this yellow one and put it there and then immediately fulfill it. You can do that. This never refills. The other thing is you can trade in 4 for 1. You have to trade in 4 goods of the same type. You wouldn't be able to trade in 2 citrus fruit and 2 spice. It would have to be 4 of one type. You could even trade in 4 time counters if you want. You can't do the reverse. You can't get time counters this way, but it is a way you can get a good by trading in 4 of something. And when you fulfill a contract, you then get the top face-up card of the next higher value. So if I were able to go to England and fulfill this 2 contract, I would immediately get the top 3 valued contract. That would go onto my board there. Now I have 2 contracts that have a destination of Italy. So if I, play my cards right, so to speak, I can later on travel to Italy and deliver multiple contracts. You can deliver multiple contracts on your turn, not a problem. Just each contract you can only fulfill once on your turn. So even if I had 4 grain, if I go to England, I can only fulfill that contract once that turn. But on a later turn, if I go back to England, I can fulfill it again if I still have the card. And I would get another card of the next higher value. So over the course of the game, of course, you're trying to fulfill the higher and higher valued contracts. When you fulfill a 5, you get a 6. When you fulfill a 6, you get a 7. When you fulfill a 10, you get the Peace of Westphalia cards worth 14 points and triggers the end of the game. Now there's something else that happens too. When you travel to a location and you fulfill contracts, do whatever it is you have to do, the other players have an option of traveling with you, and they have to pay you for that privilege. And the cost to them is in the corner here. So if they're a passenger on your trip, they would have to pay a one-time marker if they're going to a major location, and two-time markers if they're going to a minor location, and they pay the active player. So that's another way of getting tokens. The other thing is, when you go to a location, whether it's your turn or you're going on somebody else's turn, if you have bonus cards for that location, you can get some goods. In this case, if I were to go to Italy, I would get, if it's my turn, I would get 2 calf skins. And this one says if I go to Italy as a passenger, so it's not my turn, but I'm tagging along with the active player, I would just get 1. So you can see there's a bit of logistics involved, right? Like, you know, if you have multiple contracts to Italy and you have a bonus card in Italy, then you want to go to Italy. Maybe the bonus card will get you goods that you can use for different contracts, and you can do stuff like that. So the game continues like this until either one player gets the Peace of Westphalia card, and they get that if they fulfill a 10 value contract. There's no 11s. Instead, they get the Peace of Westphalia, and that's the only card of that type. The game can also end when all the time counters run out, and after that, you would just use them from the supply. But at that point, every player gets 1 more round, and in that last round, you aren't forced to sell your excess contracts. You can have more than 5, but only 5 of them, and you can choose which 5, you can always rearrange your contracts. Only 5 of them will score full points. You score full points for the 5 contracts that you put on your board, and in that last round, if you have extra contracts, the lowest valued ones, you put to the side of the board, and they will score you half points. No rounding, interesting. There's half points in this game. And of course, you also get points based on how well you did with any of the building cards that you got. The last thing I want to mention, and this is a personal thing of mine, is there's an extra rule which I left out. And that is that whenever you take the last time counter from a row, that's why it's arranged in rows, you actually flip it over and look at the letter. And then all players who have a good in that column would have to choose one to lose. So they added spoilage in the game, and the ones in the A's are more likely to spoil than the ones in the D's, for example. Honestly, the rule's a little bit wonky, because there's also a little thing where the active player, if they don't like it, they can like look at another one. So, and all it does is it adds a little bit of randomness. Honestly, I don't even play with that. And it's an official variant in the book. It just says don't bother with that. That's pretty much it. You're ready to play Merkator. I can guess some of the potential complaints that players may have about this game. Obviously the look is a little bit drab. It's just more of an old style, right? Like a lot of older games before this had this kind of styling, right? I even look at games like, Princes of Florence and stuff like that. So it kind of harkens back to those days. But some players may look at it's kind of the color scheme is kind of grays and browns. They may find that a little bit drab, but it makes the colors of the goods, the cubes, stand out more. And I think some players may find the game a little bit repetitive because you're always progressing, right? Especially in the long game, of course. You start with a 2 and a 3 contract, and you got to get a 4, and then a 5, and then a 6, and then a 7. And you can definitely get the feeling probably that you're doing the same thing over and over again. If a game is fun, I don't really hold repetitiveness too much against it because I'm doing more of the things that I like to do. But it's a complaint that I can guess people could have about this game. And unfortunately, there are 2 tiny issues which I feel like I want to mention off the top. For one thing, there is a misprint in one of the building cards. Those are the end game scoring cards. One card is extremely overpowered for its cost. I think it's called the Ulster House. Anyway, check Lookout Games' website for a new version of that card. And I would recommend sleeving those cards, printing out that, and just slipping it into the sleeve there. There is one tiny rule as well that I don't like, and which I deliberately kind of left out of that rules go over, which was the concept of spoilage. So in a typical game, whenever you finish one row of time counters, so you're taking the last time counter from a row, you flip it over and it shows one or two letters on it. And if it's two letters, it's always the same letter. And if it's one letter, then every player has to discard one cube from that column. A, B, C, and D. I don't know if there are E's, but A, B, C, and D for sure. And some of them are like two A's or two B's. So you have to discard two cubes from those columns. So the goods on the left, like the fruit, will spoil or potentially spoil more than things like saltpeter, right? But I find that rule a little bit wonky. A, it slows the game down a little bit. B, there's a little bit of an extra rule is like, oh, the person flipping it, if they don't like it, they can flip one more, but then they have to accept that result. And these sorts of things, they're just these weird, wonky rules. And I just like to kind of streamline the game as much as possible. So when I noticed that there was a variant in the back of the rules that said, don't even bother with that, just play with no spoilage, I'm like, yes, that's one less rule. And it allows you to plan ahead. I'm not against randomness in the game, but if it adds extra rules just to achieve it, and what you gain from it, to me is not really worth it. So I'd recommend just leaving that out. Play without spoilage. It is an official variant of the rulebook. Okay, I'm pretty much done with all the negative stuff I can really think about this game. But it sometimes can be hard to describe why you like a game. I'll do the best I can. One thing I like is that it's very obviously a pick up and deliver game in terms of that genre, right? And it's in that genre, it's all about efficiency, right? If it's in a typical pick up and deliver game, and I'm thinking Auf Achse is probably, for me, the prime example of that. The efficiency is planning your route, right? I'm going to pick up as much as I can on this side of the map and then make one trip down to the other end of the map and do as much as I can there, so I'm not spending too much time traveling back and forth. And that's sort of represented in this game, but the way it does it really breaks some of the some of the conventions of the genre. So the idea that you're always traveling from Hamburg instead of traveling from where the last player left off, it's not it's not like a shared ship that you're moving around, but also each player doesn't have their own marker, and they're planning out, I'll go here and then there and then there. It's always assumed you're traveling from Hamburg to somewhere else, and that's a trip. And so it kind of fiddles with those conventions a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot more types of goods. There's 16 types of goods total, but you have a lot of flexibility. There's only 8 colored cubes. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of which ones you want. Another convention that's kind of broken is that concept of time, right? Certainly staying at home doesn't gain you time, literally. Like, everything costs time in real life. So if you were to map real life into this sort of theming, you would assume that time is not a commodity that you can gain or lose, right? Maybe everybody starts with some time, and then if they stay home, they spend less time, but if they go far away, they spend more time. And he kind of zeroed on that scale. He kind of put the 0 point at a different place. Instead of everything losing time, instead, the 0 point is a little bit further up the scale. I don't know if I'm describing this well. Such that if you do things that do less time than expected, you like you're staying close to home, so you're not spending that much time, you're actually gaining time counters. So it's just different enough, right? It really adds something different and unique to the pick up and deliver genre that I really haven't seen much in other games. And it really shows the flexibility of Uwe Rosenberg, but also the kind of really weird way he thinks. I mean that as a compliment, right? Like, I am surprised that somebody could come up with that, and the fact that it still works. I like that the turns aren't too long in the game. Because on your turn, obviously you're doing your investments at the beginning of your turn, and sometimes you think, oh, I don't know what to get. Maybe that takes a little bit of time, but otherwise it's traveling to a location, picking up goods, and maybe fulfilling contracts, and that's pretty much it. And another player can put the new goods on the board based on that. And is something for other players to potentially do on their turn. So they can travel along, right? And they can do things. So they don't have to wait until their turn comes around before they can achieve things. And I do like that because, like, for example, if you go to a major location, right? Let's say, oh, I'm really hoping to go to England. I really need to pick up some coal, right? And I have a contract to deliver there. So I have enough goods for the contract in England. I'm going to go to England, fulfill the contract, and pick up the coal. Well, somebody else goes to England first, and they pick up all the coal. And you're like, man, I really wanted coal. At this point, you probably don't want to go to England yourself. You don't want to waste your turn just to fulfill the contract if you can help it, right? You want to maximize your efficiency. You want to go to a location to fulfill the contract, but you also want to pick up stuff, right, to help you with the next contract. That's what ideally you would do. It's all about the efficiency. So if somebody else goes there to that location, you said, you know what, I'm going to tag along. I'm going to give that player a time counter, and I'm going to go along so I can fulfill that contract. Now I don't have to go to England. On my turn, I can focus on going somewhere else. And like I said, it keeps players kind of involved in everyone else's turn. Actually, I really like the idea of forced investments. So the idea is that you can have at most 5 contracts, and you can sell contracts whenever you want. If you get more than 5, you have to sell them and get money. And you can sit on your money, but if ever you get more than 15 coins, you have to spend coins. And the coins are either the bonus cards, allow you to get more cubes, goods, as you're traveling around the board, or you're aiming for end-game scoring. And you know what? I feel like a lot of games would just give players the flexibility. They would say, oh yeah, collect as much money as you want, buy whatever you want later. And Uwe Rosenberg kind of forces players to spend that money throughout the game. Not to save it until the perfect card comes out, but it's like, no, you have to stay on your toes. I have this much money. Oh my God, I have to buy something. Maybe there's one card I was really hoping to get. It's not there right now. So what should I do? Should I buy one of these ones, which are not quite as good for me? Or maybe I'll just buy like the bare minimum to get under 15, kind of save my money, and then hope that a card that's better for me comes up, for my next turn. You can do things like this. But I like the fact that it forces you to invest your money as you get it, and you might be investing it in things which are not 100% perfect for you. You still make a choice. There's 4 building cards, there's 4 bonus cards, you have a choice. But it might not be the absolute perfect card, but you have to buy something, right? And of course, there's a decision of, do I buy bonus cards for now, because that will help me during the game, or do I get those building cards that will help me at the end of the game, right? Obviously, early in the game, you're getting bonus cards. Later in the game, you're getting building cards. But if there's a very good building card and you think you're already working toward that, get that early, and then you can work toward that, right? It's a really unique game, especially for the genre, because pick up and deliver is kind of a been there, done that kind of genre. Lots of games have come out of that type, and there's kind of an expectation, I think, in the genre as to what to expect from a pick up and deliver game. And like I said, Merkator just breaks a lot of those conventions, but it makes for a really nice, thoughtful experience. Might be a little drab to look at. Have a look at the how to play, decide if you can accept it. But for me, it's definitely a board gem. And I don't think Merkator will ever leave my collection. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Merkator don't stop being good just because new games come out. Take care.